Hello everybody and welcome back to another video here on my channel. Today I thought that I will present you my Wayta Trainer Prodigy deck. This is actually a high power EDH deck that I'm often playing and I do really enjoy it. And I thought, yeah, I will simply talk about the whole deck and run you through. So first of all, when we talk about Wayta Trainer Prodigy, she is a Naya commander, a 1/5 with haste. And you can pay 2 generic and 1 green and tap her. So target creature fights another target creature and this ability costs 2 less to activate if both of these targets are creatures that you control. And of course, as with many new commanders, she has this double triggered ability stuff, especially when creatures are being dealt damage that you control. I have built this deck as a combo deck. And yeah, I will just simply start running you through these cards. Some of these cards are actually in German, so I will maybe put the English version right here. And yeah, I'd say we jump right into it. As I've said, this is Wayta Trainer Prodigy. One of the cards that I'm playing is Cosmic Rebirth. I find this card very interesting. It isn't that new yet. I mean, okay, there's probably already, I don't know, when did the Aftermath come out? Yeah, I don't really remember, it doesn't matter. And choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If its mana value is 3 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, put it into your hand, you gain 3 life. This is the only graveyard recursion that I run in this deck. And yeah, I just added it because I found this card. I find it is not too bad and it finds a few key pieces of mine back. At least one of my favorite dinosaurs, but I will come back to that. I run Powerstone Minefield, a 4 mana enchantment, and whenever a creature attacks or blocks, Powerstone Minefield deals 2 damage to it. This is extremely powerful and it helped me out in a lot of different situations, especially for myself. If I have Wayta on the battlefield and I attack with one of my dinosaurs, it immediately deals 2 damage to the creature and I get 2 Enrage triggers most of the time. And most importantly is, for example, I had situations where I was playing against a Finn the Fangbearer deck, which plays a lot of 1/1 Death Touch creatures, and yeah, I pretty much locked down my opponent with this card simply because whenever a creature attacks, so this also counts for your opponents, and also when a creature blocks, so you're never running into the negative when situations happen like you attack, your creature gets pinged, and then your opponent has to consider if they want to block, and if they declare a block, the creature first gets dealt 2 damage, so really good card. I run a Shadow Spear, mostly for the activated ability, because yeah, sometimes I do have to control the board and getting rid of Hexproof or Indestructible helps out a lot. I run, how's this card called in English again? Yeah, I will link it here. And whenever a creature I control is dealt damage, I put a 1/1 counter on it. I think it's called Rite of Passage, I believe. Doesn't matter. And yeah, especially with Enrage, I put 2 counters on that creature. And in addition to that, with Wayta, yeah, I get 2 of those +1/+1 counters. So really cool addition. Rhythm of the Wild, I play this card because if I run into a control matchup, I can simply immediately make sure to always resolve my creatures. And in addition to that, in most cases, I give them haste so they can attack, and this synergizes as well with Powerstone Minefield, depending on how my board looks or which dinosaur I bring out. The only board wipe I play in this deck is Blasphemous Act, and I don't play it for the board wipe reasons. I play it to deal a bunch of damage to my indestructible creatures, which will then deal damage to my opponents, but I will come to my win cons later. Now we will begin with the card draw sections. These were just a few cards that were in the deck that I really couldn't fit into any section. And yeah, Ripjaw Raptor, Enrage, when it is dealt damage, I draw a card, and this gets doubled with Wayta on the battlefield. Curious Altosaur, Vigilance, Reach. I also wanted to have a Reach creature for certain flying creatures, and whenever a dinosaur you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Sylvan Library, I don't think that I have to explain this card. Really powerful and a really good card. Pantlaza is a great card, especially in this type of deck, because most enraged creatures are dinosaurs, or I think all enraged creatures are dinosaurs. Oh no, not. Well, especially with keyword, I think there are only dinosaurs. Let me know down in the comments. Pantlaza, very powerful card advantage piece, and when I discover for 4, I can find a lot of powerful cards in this deck, so I definitely had to run Pantlaza. Toski, Bearer of Secrets, 1/1 indestructible, always attacks, and whenever a creature I control deals combat damage to a player, I draw a card. And this is especially nice because Toski often runs into the point that you use Toski, you attack, and your opponents just jump block it. And if you have Rite of Passage on the field, Toski at least gets a few +1/+1 counters. And yeah, this makes Toski a little bit more threatening in this deck especially. Rishkar's Expertise. This card on the first look will surprise you a little bit. I don't run that many high power creatures, but there are still a few in it, and pretty often Rishkar's Expertise is a great card. I also like it simply because, yeah, for the card draw advantage. When I built this deck, I had a few struggles with not getting my win cons together. My struggle was to get card draw going. And so I definitely added Rishkar's Expertise, Return of the Wild Speaker. Most of the cards are also from the Dinosaur Precon. So if you have the Dinosaur Precon where also Wayta is in, you have a lot of cards that you can already throw together to rebuild this deck. Return of the Wild Speaker, yeah, instant choose one, draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-humans you control, or you can choose non-human creatures you control, get +3/+3. I definitely wanted to play Knave of the Dire Hunt, a 4 mana 3/3, and whenever one or more creatures you control fight or become blocked, draw a card. This triggered ability sadly isn't doubled with Wayta because it doesn't refer to being dealt damage, but I had situations where, yeah, Knave is simply a really cool card. I don't want to say that it is the most powerful, because you bring her out for 4 mana, you need to pay 3 to put it into an activated ability, and you only double target creature's power until end of turn. The relevant thing is that your opponents must block the creature that you've just doubled the power from, which is good, but yeah, it's still a very mana intensive card, and the payoff doesn't always appear that much. But if you can get a certain fight chain going with Wayta and Knave, it can still end up in a lot of advantage. Knave on itself is a really cool card, but not the most powerful one. One of my key pieces is definitely Expedited Inheritance, a new card that came out with Murders at Carlos Manor. And simply by reading the card, whenever a creature is dealt damage, so this also counts for your opponents, so make sure when you want to bring this card out, its controller may exile that many cards from the top of the library. They may play those cards until the end of their next turn, and this ability gets doubled for you if you have Wayta on the battlefield, which is a lot of card advantage. In addition to that, it is a May ability, so you can just resolve the different damage counts just one by one. Check if you found something that you want to keep or that is enough for your situation, and then you can just decline all of the remaining triggers. But definitely be on the lookout when you resolve this card, as it also counts for your opponents. But in most cases, this is a self-fight deck. You don't fight that many of your opponent's creatures, so still a really powerful card, and you should definitely get it if you want to play Wayta Trainer Prodigy. I got a Guardian project for this deck. As I've said, I had struggles with building card draw in this deck or card advantage, and Guardian project is always a safe choice when you want to simply get some card draw going, and it doesn't interfere that much with my mana curve. Runic Armosaur. It is a dinosaur, so it also has synergy with Pandlaza, and whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that isn't a mana ability, you may draw a card. I like the May on it. Most of the cases you will definitely draw the card. And yeah, it's also a dinosaur, so great synergy with Pandlaza. Good card. Lifecrafter's Bestiary. 3 mana artifact at the beginning of your upkeep, scry run, which is always nice. Of course, then for every creature spell you cast, you may pay 1 green if you do draw a card. I do like the card selection with the upkeep, and yeah, the additional card draw if I pay for it. So yeah, it's a nice artifact that you can run in this deck. Not the most powerful one, but I definitely added it. Shake the Foundation, one of the not so common cards that you see nowadays. It's a 3 mana instant. It deals 1 damage to each creature without flying, and you draw a card. I have to be honest, I have played a lot of games with Wayta so far, and this card, I think I casted it once. It did a lot of work, I gotta say that, because I had a lot of dinosaurs on the battlefield and I got a few Enrage triggers. I drew a card, so that was nice, but haven't played it yet that much. Now, from the card draw section, we will now come to the removal and interaction section. I run a Force of Vigor simply because I had it laying around. I once cracked it in a booster, and yeah, I don't have to explain this card. It's simply free interaction if you pitch a card from your hand in your opponent's turn. And yeah, it's great removal for artifacts and enchantments. Primal Might, it's a green X sorcery. Target creature you control gets +X/+X until the end of turn. Then it fights up to one target creature you don't control. I gotta say, this is a rare, but in my opinion, Tail Swipe is way better. I believe it's from Dominaria Remastered. Check the card. Yep. And simply because this is sorcery speed, I don't like this card. I should replace it with Tail Swipe, which is way better in my opinion. But yeah, I run it for now. Bronzebeak Foragers, the Grasp of Fate in Dinosaur, is a 4-mana 3/4, and when it enters the battlefield for each opponent, we may exile up to one target non-land permanent until they leave the battlefield. And for 1 white and X has to be the mana value of a card exiled with Bronzebeak Foragers. We put it into our opponent's graveyard and we gain X life. I gotta say, I haven't used this ability much, but Bronzebeak Foragers is often a great solution to win some more time to get back into the game while your opponents try to remove Bronzebeak Foragers. And yeah, it's a great dinosaur, definitely worth playing. Now we come to a little bit of more standard removal. I play Generous Gift. What I do really like to play is Bushwhack from the Bravos War. It's a sorcery where you can choose one. Either you fix your lands by finding a basic land to hand, or you can choose that target creature fights another target creature you don't control. This is straight up better, in my opinion, than Primal Might, which I have revealed earlier, simply because it's way more flexible. You can simply fix your mana if you need it. You can keep a little bit more of a more risky hand, maybe with just 2 lands. And yeah, if you find yourself in a different spot, you can just fight something. Really, really good card in this deck. Beast Within, Cast Into Fire. I have just replaced this card. Before Cast Into Fire, I was playing, how's it called? Double Shot, I believe. Double Shot costs 1 generic less and is also an instant and can deal 1 damage to each up to 2 target creatures. But I saw Cast Into Fire and I was like, I want to have that exile target artifact removal, because pinging damage is great, especially if you have enraged creatures on the field and you can just ping them for more advantage. It's really powerful. But sometimes you're so far ahead and there's still this one key piece of stacks pieces from your opponents as an artifact, and this one definitely helps removing it. Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, Jesus. And then I also play Reckless Rage, great card. I can deal 4 damage to a creature an opponent controls and 2 damage to a creature that I control. What I once misplayed is you definitely need a creature on your side too to resolve the spell. You cannot simply say, okay, I ping 4 damage at your creature without having a creature on your field. This is a requirement that the spell has. And 4 damage for 1 red mana is great. You can shoot out. What I just had recently was that I shot down a Winota at the beginning of combat, which was great. And I also got an Enrage trigger from one of my creatures. Let's come to the section what maybe qualifies this deck to be a high power deck. I think if you play a lot of Tutors, yeah, you're automatically in a high power section. Worldly Tutor, you find a creature card to the top. Shared Summons, in my opinion, quite an underrated tutor, because you find 2 creature cards with different names into your hand. Of course, for 5 mana, it is quite expensive, but especially in this deck, it is great because you need several creatures to win the game, as this is a combo deck. And Shared Summons definitely helped me in a lot of games to finish it by just passing the turn, either having Wayta open to fight something. And if my opponents played around the fight mechanic, I used Shared Summons to win my remaining win cons and run away with the game. Enlightened Tutor, especially for cards like, where is it again? Expedited Inheritance. I added an Enlightened Tutor, simply because Expedited Inheritance is just way too powerful, but you will see way more enchantments that are definitely really, really good in this deck. Eladamri's Call, Forerunner of the Empire, quite a cool tutor for a dinosaur card on top of your battlefield. And when a dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Forerunner of the Empire deal 1 damage to each creature. I don't have to explain this card. Back in Ixalan, this was already for many players, okay, this is a card that I definitely need in an Enrage deck. So yeah, this is a must play in this deck. It is so powerful. You find your key dinosaur to the top. You can cast it then if you have enough mana available, of course. And yeah, get a bunch of Enrage triggers. Clear also a lot of you small mana creatures or 1/1 creatures from your opponents. It's a really, really good card. Another enchantment that I want to find with Enlightened Tutor is Defense of the Heart. At the beginning of your upkeep, and if an opponent controls 3 or more creatures, sacrifice Defense of the Heart, and then you find 2 creature cards onto the battlefield. And this is a really, really powerful card. I pulled it off twice so far that it happened to me. Of course, in the best case, you can protect this card. For example, a card that I also still consider playing in this deck is Atamio Safekeeping. And yeah, but if this resolves, you can pretty much win the game on the spot, or definitely turn the tides to your favor. Cards that you maybe want to find with Defense of the Heart is Marauding Raptor into a... Let me quickly search it. You can go for the line of Marauding Raptor and a Polyraptor. And when they both enter the battlefield at the same time, Marauding Raptor sees the Polyraptor, will deal 2 damage to it. You will make a token and you start a loop immediately. Of course, for especially these infinite token loops, you could put in Impact Tremors and just shoot your opponents down, which is already very powerful and yeah, already quite a strong combo. You can also find, if you want, Polyraptor and Forerunner of the Empire both enter at the same time with Defense of the Heart. And then you will deal 1 damage to each creature. Also Polyraptor. You will find another dinosaur on the top. And especially since this happens in your upkeep, you will have mana available to immediately cast that dinosaur and get another trigger, and you can see where this chain is going. And yeah, since I'm now talking about the Defense of the Heart, a combo that I once found with Defense of the Heart was going for Forerunner of the Empire into Silverclad Ferocidons, which was really, really nasty. Both entered at the same time. Triggers happened because Forerunner of the Empire killed a lot of creatures with 1 damage, but it also dealt damage to Ferocidons while Wayta was on the battlefield. Each of my opponent had to sacrifice 2 permanents. Then the Tutor trigger resolved. I found a cheap dinosaur to the top, casted the dinosaur, trigger Forerunner of the Empire, trigger Silverclad Ferocidons. We already were at 4 permanents in turn 5, I believe. And then I simply decided to tap Wayta and let Forerunner of the Empire fight Silverclad Ferocidons. My opponents had to sacrifice 6 permanents already in turn 5. And yeah, I'll tell you as it is, they all scooped, and I definitely understand why. This is probably one of the most nastiest combos you can go for. If you have the thing about Marauding Raptor into Polyraptor is that you cannot break this chain, as Marauding Raptor always has to deal the damage. So this line of tutoring might be best with Impact Tremors, which I don't play in this deck. I simply would interrupt this chain here with Wayta fighting them and then have a huge army of Polyraptors. But there are a lot of different ways how you can approach a Defense of the Heart trigger in this deck. As I do also have quite a few big creatures in this deck, or I can make myself a few very big creatures with cards like I have mentioned Rite of Passage. I believe this card is called like that. It would be quite embarrassing if it is called different in English now. And as I've said, I can make myself a few big creatures with fighting them and putting +1/+1 counters on them. So I also play Chandra's Ignition. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. But here's the thing about Chandra's Ignition. It can also be cast on a not so strong creature simply to get a bunch of Enrage triggers from dinosaurs on your field. Because it deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. I think this card in English is called Stitched Puppet or something like that. It is indestructible, and as it enters the battlefield, I have to choose a player. And whenever this creature is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. I gotta say, I have just added this card. I haven't played it yet. I'm not a fan of it already, simply because I have to choose one player. And as this is a combo deck, I try to win in one turn and not simply take out one player specifically. I still want to test it. to see how it goes, and I would like to have more indestructible blockers or more consistency with finding indestructible blockers. And yeah, so this is why I added this card, simply to have protection for some beatdown decks. And yeah, see how it goes. I cannot say much about this card yet, but we will see. The most important card in this deck is the Cacophodon. It's a 4-mana 2/5 and it has Enrage. When it is dealt damage, I untap target permanent. Here's the thing about Cacophodon and Wayta. As Wayta is one of those legendary creatures that doubles certain triggered abilities, I can tap Wayta, let my Cacophodon fight anything. Cacophodon is being dealt damage, and then I have 2 untap triggers. I can untap Wayta and I can untap a land, and so I can go into an infinite loop of fights. The requirement is that all of my creatures are indestructible, to which I will come later. For especially this case, I also considered adding Achroma, simply because, yeah, it gives everything on my board indestructible. But Cacophodon is definitely a key piece for a lot of really cool infinite combos in this deck, and I will come back to this card later. Another powerful card that I'm playing is Seedborn Muse. So on every untap, I untap all of my permanents with every other player, which simply allows me to use Wayta over and over again in all of my opponent's turns, which will generate a lot of value and yeah, give me a huge advantage. Brash Taunter, way more powerful and better than the Puppet, simply because it is indestructible. It has power on it, which is very relevant in this deck, because the Puppet is a 0/1 and Brash Taunter is a 1/1. And yeah, when it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent, which is doubled because of Wayta. And for 3 mana and tapping Brash Taunter, it can fight another target creature, which can also be my creature, which is yeah, one of the key strategies in this deck, especially with cards like the Puppet or Brash Taunter. Cards like, I have mentioned it earlier, Blasphemous Act get extremely powerful. As with Wayta on the battlefield, if I'm able to pull off the Blasphemous Act, both of these will deal a total of 26 damage to my opponent, simply because Blasphemous Act deals damage to those creatures. It gets doubled because of Wayta, ping ping, and yeah, will most likely take a few players out. Brash Taunter is indestructible, so it is a great piece to win the game when I do have my Cacophodon. And already these two are a great combo if I'm able to give Cacophodon indestructible, which is possible in this deck. But I will come to that later. I also do have to say, I think there are way more better and cheaper ways to give my Cacophodon indestructible, but you will see when I get to the indestructible section. Another win con of mine is Wrathful Raptors, which also came with the precon. And yeah, a 5-mana 5/5 with trample, and whenever a dinosaur you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dinosaur, so we can also choose players. So if I can give Cacophodon indestructible, I can also let these, or if I give these two indestructible, I can let them fight against each other all the time with Wayta, untap stuff, and ping my opponents down. As you might have seen in a few gameplays on my channel already where I've played this deck, this happened quite often. Another card that I'm playing is Apex Altasaur, a 9-mana 10/10. This is one of my biggest creatures in this deck, especially for cards like Rishka's Expertise or Return to the Wild Speaker. It is a great card, and it is also a great piece of board control, simple as it is. The doubling Enrage trigger doesn't matter that much, except for my opponent has instant speed hexproof shenanigans, so I can choose another target for the second Enrage trigger that I get. And yeah, I just wanted to play it because it is a big dinosaur and helps me with Rishka's Expertise and stuff like that, or also with Expedited Inheritance. I do play Ill-Tempered Loner, and so far I'm quite disappointed with this card. It's a 4-mana 3/3, and whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target, and for 2 mana I can pump him up. I was hoping to see his backside a little bit more, the Howl Pack Avenger, and it is a 4/4, and whenever a permanent I control is dealt damage, he deals that much damage to any target, which would all get doubled. Doesn't matter if we are talking about back or front side. But I was thinking, okay, I can maybe bring Seedborn Muse out at some point, just pass the turn, we get to nighttime, and then I can start a chain, but hasn't happened yet. So far I'm not that happy with Ill-Tempered Loner, and we will see how this card will stick around in this deck. Now we are coming to the protection and indestructible section. I do play Indestructible Formation because I had it laying around, and creatures you control Indestructible is just what you need to start all of the different combos that I have just mentioned earlier to win the game. So I do have Unbreakable Formation, I do play Make a Stand. I could also play And They Shall Know No Fear and name dinosaurs and win with that. I do have Flawless Maneuver as free protection spell when I have Wayta on the battlefield. I do run Mithril Code simply because this is a very reactive deck, and in many cases I simply find myself, okay, pass the turn, pass the turn, pass the turn. Okay, I can still flash this one in and equip Wayta with it, and so Wayta gets indestructible. Because another chain that I can simply start is when I don't have too many key pieces, Wayta gets indestructible with my Mithril Code. I can bring the Kakophodan out, still let them fight against each other, while Expedited Inheritance is out, exile 6 cards from the top of my library, and maybe find something that will get me out of a certain position. I do have Akroma's Will because it came with the precon, and it still can be used as a very powerful card. It often helped me. The problem is if you choose both modes and your creatures get protection from all colors, you cannot let them fight against each other anymore because Wayta needs to target, and that's quite a downside, but it still can be used as a protection spell, or if you have really big dinosaurs on the battlefield, you can swing for the win with them. Heroic Intervention, who would have guessed? I do run a Deflecting Sword because if my chain gets interrupted, for example with a Path to Exile on my Kakophodan, I definitely need to protect it. So Deflecting Sword must have. Let's quickly run over the ramp section. Soaring, Arcane Signet, Ranging Raptors, my personal favorite dinosaur. When it is dealt damage, I may search my library for 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. It's a 2/3. And I really love this line of Wayta, fight Ranging Raptors, get 2 basics. I love this line, and I always will enjoy to play it. Farseek, Nature's Law, free visits. I do run Intrepid Paleontologist, a 2-mana 2/2, which you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. And you can also pay 2 generic, so he can tap for his exile ability to exile target card from a graveyard. This is my only graveyard hate piece that I have in this deck, and I often had situations where I was playing against graveyard decks and I tutored for the Paleontologist to keep my opponents with graveyards in check, and it worked out great. It is still a 2-mana 2/2, so it can easily be removed with any interaction, but it is a great card. And if you find a window to exile a dinosaur card from a graveyard, you can cast it with a finality counter. So Paleontologist, great ramp creature in this deck. And now please remember the lines that I have described with my Kakophodan. I do run Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl simply to give my lands additional mana. This is also the reason why I do run all of the different bounce lands, Celestia Sanctuary, Gruul Turf, and Boros Garrison, to be able to net mana with certain with this Kakophodan fight chain. I have found myself in spots where I was able to make infinite mana and then just draw through my deck and find all of the key pieces that I needed with Expedited Inheritance, make infinite mana, and win on the spot. But for that, you need to net mana, and this is why Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth are in the deck. And also all of the different bounce lands that make 2 mana anyways. I was once lucky and pulled a Boseiju, so I added it to this deck as additional interaction. Plaza of Heroes as additional protection card for Wayta in certain scenarios, really, really helpful. And the rest of the mana base isn't that interesting. I do run the 3 different shock lands for this deck. I do have Rootbound Crag, Clifftop, and Sunpetal Grove. I run a Jungle Shrine, Jetmir's Garden. I do have Cinderglade and Canopy Vista, Exotic Orchard, Command Tower. I do play the reveal lands simply because I had them. I wanted to have a lot of different colors, and that's actually it. And then I run a certain different amount of basics. And just to let you know, I will link my current deck list in the description below. So you can always check out what I change about this deck. You can also feel free to copy it. and this has worked out for me. I think during this whole video I explained a few cards and a few additions or changes that I would like to do. And I'm also interested in hearing what you think about this deck. I do really like playing this deck. It is a combo deck. You need to really learn the deck and work your way towards winning with either Kakophodon, with a huge army of Polyraptors, if you want to win with the Forerunner of the Empire and Silverclad Ferocidon's line. There are a lot of different things. I'm really still not happy with this card. And Seedborn Muse always performing in this deck. And yeah, this is what I can say about this deck. It is not that easy to learn to play if you just build it. So you definitely need to learn a lot about your opening hands, in my opinion. You need to be able to get a good card draw going, to find a few key pieces. But once you found them, you are really well set up to rush through the game and win on the spot. I do have a few gameplays here on my channel, so feel free to check them out. And yeah, simply enjoy how I played this deck. Maybe I also won a few of those games. I think I won a few of those games, yeah. And see how most of these combos work. So yeah, overall, I hope that you enjoyed this little deck tech video of mine. It got quite long. And yeah, overall, I hope you enjoyed it. And then I would say, see you in the next video. Goodbye, guys.